Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another one of our wonderful podcasts, or what should I call CRIN casts, where we're exploring the multiple dimensions of how the Clean Resource Innovation Network will show up at the Conference of the Parties in Dubai at the end of the month. My name's Bill Whitelaw. I'm the Managing Director of Strategy and Sustainability at Geologic Systems. We're a proud CRIN stakeholder, and we're really honored to be able to help tell the stories of the CRIN ecosystem, but more importantly, the people of CRIN. And so we're very proud on this episode to have with us today one of the leading emission voices in Canada, and Scott Volk, who is the Director of Emissions and Innovation at Tourmaline Oil Corp. And if you don't know Tourmaline, by the end of this conversation, you'll have a better sense of what is motivating and driving the emission strategies and the thinking strategies of one of the top resource companies in Canada. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
Tourmaline has some phenomenal emissions management and mitigation goals, but talk to us about, for you as an emissions expert, what have you learned in the last 5 years through tech innovation, through your contributions to organizations like the PTAC and CRIN? How do you unlock that success?
The learnings are incredible. We're learning every day and everything is huge. I would say a lot of the focus for Tourmaline have been in kind of 4 key points. We've done a lot of work on fuel displacements. We've done a ton of work in diesel displacement. We've done a lot of work on water recycling, especially in that Montney section of BC where we talked about. That's critically important to us to recycle air water. We're at about 95% of our water is recycled now. Then methane mitigation is a huge piece of what Tourmaline works on. And then just purely energy efficiency. And I think people kind of leave energy efficiency behind and forget about it. But we've worked really hard at being a low cost capital producer for some time. And in order to do that, you need to produce large amounts of volumes with very little amounts of inputs. So we've been really focused on energy efficiency for some time. And that's really helped us hit our sustainability numbers, is to get large amounts of natural gas with very little amounts of energy input. And with very little amounts of energy input means you have very little amounts of emissions. So that's helped us a ton.
Right.
But if I come back to the methane space on the learning piece, that collaboration in that space has been huge. So we started out early working with a consortium called the Natural Gas Innovation Fund.
Absolutely.
The Natural Gas Innovation Fund has a number of different branches, and we've been there to develop it through a lot of it. So one of those pieces would be the granting organization. So the granting piece of the Natural Gas Innovation Fund works on taking industry money and putting it towards clean tech companies that are working on decarbonizing the natural gas sector. So that's an obvious way to start getting to know the sector, getting to know all the different companies that play in the space. And when you're funding them, you kind of learn everything about what they're doing and how it can be used at your site. The next thing we started was we built an NGF Emissions Testing Centre. So Tourmaline is the host of the NGF Emissions Testing Centre. We have a site at West Wolf, just kind of outside of Edson. And at that site is a real live application where we can validate clean tech in the methane space. So we do all sorts of incredible things, from satellite detection testing there to fixed wing detection, some quantification work with all sorts of continuous monitors, and then work on all sorts of new mitigation technologies. From Tourmaline's perspective, it's been incredible because we get to see all the latest and greatest of all the methane abatement technology kind of comes to us, and we work with them. And then obviously we get such a close look at how they're doing and where they can be used within our operations as well.
A lot of folks who aren't day-to-day close to it sort of don't understand why it's important to have a holistic approach, because there's emissions everywhere and you need to manage and mitigate them everywhere in order to reach a goal, right? So tell us about that rig again, because that's really quite fascinating, because people think of rigs as big pieces of metal belching diesel fumes, and that may have been true 30 years ago. But some of our rigs today are more technologically opulent than a Tesla.
They are incredible. Like now most rigs are running from a joystick. You don't have anyone on the floor working that way. The driller on the joystick in the seat and running the whole rig from computer screens that are all around them. But at the same time, the technology that we put in behind to make it efficient and low emissions is incredible as well. That rig that we were talking about has a 1 megawatt battery that's installed in it, and then it has 100% natural gas engines. The typical for drilling rigs would be to run diesel fuel, as you mentioned. Yep. This one doesn't run any diesel fuel at all, so that the battery allows the natural gas engines to deal with the peaks in energy demand that the rig asks for, and then allows them to be very efficient all the way through. And it has this like incredible computer system. So whichever engine needs to be running at any point in time gets turned on, and the control system will optimize itself. So really efficient drilling rig, really efficient that it displaces diesel fuel. It fits into this bigger initiative that Tourmaline's been working on for some time of displacing diesel fuel. So we're now at the point that all of our drilling rigs displace at least some amount of diesel fuel. We've got 2 that are hybrid drilling rigs, 1 that's electric, and then the rest run a biofuel system to at least displace some of the diesel fuel with natural gas.
I've always admired the Tourmaline model, which is share with the sector, so to speak. The idea that you could say to another producer where the rocks are similar in, say, South America is, oh, by the way, benefit from our learnings. It took us a while to like all this together. But fundamentally, you have a real phenomenal multi-level recipe for secret sauce. The end product is massive amounts of intensity reduction.
Yeah, that's why we're here today.
Yeah.
Tourmaline loves to share that story. In our mind, that's kind of one of those rising tides raises all ships scenario where if we all do better, the planet does better and everyone does better across the sector. So absolutely, we're about sharing all the context on our emissions reduction effort. Again, that's part of the reason for the Natural Gas Innovation Fund, ETC. When we do all that testing with all the individual companies, all those reports become public, and all the work that we put into bringing those companies from an earlier level of technology readiness to near commercial, that all kind of gets out to the whole industry and everyone gets to share in it. And it does go even beyond oil and gas. So a lot of the work we do there is on methane mitigation and methane detection and quantification. So obviously when we're working with satellite companies or fixed wing aircraft or all these different things, there's a whole bunch of things in agriculture and a whole bunch of things in municipalities that will get a lot of value out of the work that we're doing at the ETC.
And I think that whole hidden crown jewel that the ETC is, and hopefully the ability to talk about it at COP and through networking and presentations and that sort of thing. In this industry, we've got what I'd like to say in a bad geoscience metaphor is we've got tremendous porosity on great stories. We just don't have a lot of permeability linking those stories, right? And my geoscience friends just kind of roll their eyes and say, we get the point you're trying to make. But going to COP is a permeability moment in the sense of unlocking the value of those stories. And what I love about Tourmaline, it's a company that understands humility, which you can't say about every actor in our industry, right? And so what are some of the key messages you hope to deliver there?
I think mostly that Canada does have an advantage. We've got an advantage in that we've got a lot of low emissions natural gas, and we have the ability to take that to the world and displace higher carbon forms of energy, whether that be coal or even natural gas from other places around the world. We've got a lot of learnings. We've had environmental regulations since the 70s, and we started doing gas conservation and methane back then. At that point in time, it was gas conservation. It wasn't methane, but the outcome was the same. So we've got a whole long history of learnings and a whole long history of technology that we can share with the world as well and help make everyone a little bit better as well. I would really talk about the Canadian advantage in natural gas and how it can help both emissions reduction locally in Canada, how it can help around the world as far as displacing other fuels, and then really help with the technology learning and help everyone else learn how to get to similar places in their production as well.
So on that, when you speak about production, I really admire Tourmaline's, both its courage and its always seeking out a good, solid competitive advantage that the whole industry can enjoy in terms of taking that bold step of saying to a third-party verifier, come and have a look at some of our production. We want a different third-party independent set of eyes on this. So talk to us about the whole Project Canary TrustWell process and your views on certified gas production more largely as it relates to emissions dynamics.
We wanted to be relatively early in the responsibly sourced natural gas space, again, because we have that efficiency advantage. It really does give us an advantage on an emissions point of view. So we were quite confident what our emissions performance would be when a third party came and had a look at it. We wanted to say, well, we're talking about all these things we're doing. We're talking about the waste heat recovery. We're talking about the energy efficiency. We're talking about all these things that Tourmaline's doing. But now we really need to prove it. And a good way to prove it is to have a certified gas. So we worked with TrustWell. We've been leaning more towards the environmental certification type companies. That's kind of how we selected TrustWell. It has a lot of other attributes, but it's more focused on the environmental performance. And we became the first company in Canada to be certified by TrustWell. We have platinum rating on most of the wells, so that turned out really well. We got the rating that we expected to. We purposely kind of sprinkled it around through a lot of different areas in BC so that we could learn at the same time to make sure that all the different areas would have the same performance.
Talk to us about those learnings. In law, the old theory is you never ask a question unless you're pretty sure you know the answer, right? That sort of thing. And to your point, you had good faith in what the results were going to be. But, a lot of times these processes come back and they say, well, if you did this, there's learnings in there. And so were there any remarkable learnings that really helped fine-tune things out of the TrustWell process?
I would say most of the learnings were in the data process. It's not a small lift. It's not a little thing that you go and get a certified gas, you have to essentially open everything up. So they go through everything from how the wells were drilled, how they were cemented, what happened in the completions. It's a very, very thorough investigation. And then getting all the data to them in a way that they can consume it. There was lots of learnings on that space. From an emissions point of view and everything else, it worked out as we expected. Our performance was kind of as we expected and quite impressive on the certification. Being one of the few platinum-rated gases and then being the first in Canada was a great accomplishment in our books.
I do want to talk to you about Tourmaline takes its commitment to Indigenous communities very seriously. And we'll keep it within the emissions boundaries. We'll come back to that in a second. But again, I think one of the things that the world might be interested in is you've worked in the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin for a long time, and you understand the rigid regulatory and ever-increasing resolution of the regulations, if you will. All of that really is about protecting the public interest, which owns the resource, unlike a lot of other jurisdictions in the world. So Tourmaline doesn't own anything. You're renting those molecules, right, in that sense, in that pore space. But talk to us about how that also conditions corporate behavior on doing the best you can. Because you guys go way beyond the regulatory. You guys hit the spirit of the regulation way past the letter of it.
So we've always been focused on being a really responsible operator. We're focused on all parts of the environment. I know today that the greenhouse gas portion of the environment gets a tremendous amount of the wavelength, and we give it a tremendous amount as well. But we're focused on all the parts. So that's why even though water recycling is not necessarily the biggest buzzword, we're really focused on water recycling. It took a tremendous amount of effort to get to where we're recycling 95 to almost, in lots of places, 100% of our water. And then just being that good steward of the land. So again, on land waste and land use, we've been really focused on getting density and getting so that we have way less impact on the land. And then when we are working with First Nations, and we do almost everywhere we operate, it's about partnerships and about building partnerships that where we're really listening to each other and what our needs are and working together in partnership as well. But that respect of the land and that going above and beyond on environmental performance and the environment being bigger than just greenhouse gas emissions goes a long ways to have a meaningful partnership with First Nations.
You know, in our industry, the old rule of thumb is if you don't hear a new acronym by 10 o'clock, you make one up, right? So I've made one up in honor of Tourmaline. I call it the AWL Company, AWL. Somebody said to me, what does that mean? I said, this is a company that interlocks air, water, and land stewardship into one massive strategy, right? And to your point, they're all separated, but they're all tightly interlocked in terms of total stewardship. So when you think about your time at COP, what would you think about, because sometimes in Canada we do a lot of telling, oh, the world needs more Canada. But I always say, well, the world expects more of Canada. But what would be your learning expectations? What do you hope to go and learn when all of a sudden all the important climate actors and stewardship actors in the world are all in this one place and Canada becomes a small part but important part of a very complex puzzle? What do you hope to learn and bring back and share with Tourmaline, share with the sector?
I'd say one of the things I'd like to learn is how the world's valuating the price on carbon in general, how the Article 6 kind of conversations could be going as far as having natural gas or LNG going around the world and displacing higher carbon fuels and how we can work that out in the future. That is part of why we've done some work in certified gas. And then learning about some of the newer technologies. So we kind of talked about those 4 pillars being water and methane, energy efficiency, and diesel/high carbon fuel displacement. But we are doing a ton of work investigating things like teal or blue hydrogen and carbon capture. And I think there'll be a lot of things that other places in the world have a lot of learnings in those spaces as well. And then just keeping eyes wide open on methane in every place. And it's a continuous improvement model. So if you're not learning every day and you're not improving, you can be proud of yourself one day, but you need to go beat it the next.
Well, that again is really well put. And I do have a final question after my next statement, and I'm going to give you a second to sort of reflect on the value of CRIN and all this. And Tourmaline steps up all over the ecosystem. But I think for our viewers and our listeners, I think what's also important is to understand that Tourmaline is one of the lead actors in a business model that fascinates me in the Rockies LNG initiative. And just for the audience to say, watch Rockies, watch with its Indigenous partnership, and watch with Western LNG. I think it's going to be a very fascinating impact of Canadian CH4 on the world, right? And that's a critically important thing. So with all that being said, and thank you for letting me pontificate, tell us about CRIN, because you're big in the CRIN ecosystem and you're an example of what you sign up for on that social contract. It's like Hotel California. You can check out, but you never leave, right?
So we're relatively new to CRIN. I've been a member of CRIN for some time, but Tourmaline's taking a bigger role in CRIN now.
Yes.
We've kind of been interacting with all the parties around CRIN for some time. But just seeing CRIN and knowing what it's about, I would say the biggest learnings for me, or the most important part, is those interactions and the sparks that you kind of get from it. So they bring all the different people together, all the different groups. There's not a competition amongst groups. They just keep bringing it together. Whether it's the Methane Emissions Research Collaborative that we participate in BC, or the Upstream Petroleum Research Fund, or all the different pieces that Tourmaline participates in, now it's all meshed into one large ecosystem, and that's done by CRIN. So we're super excited to be a part of it. It's already been a great experience.
That is so well put, because you can see all parts of the ecosystem from any vantage point within CRIN. So with that, thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.